I have carried a lot of gear up a lot of mountains in my life, and I have learned that the heaviest thing a man can carry is a thing he was wrong about. I carried one out of the Talver cut on a night in the rain, and I have not set it down since. Her name was Della Roan. We did not call her that. We did not call her much of anything at first, because a man who does not intend to remember you does not spend a name on you. She came to us the way rain comes to that country, unasked, out of a gray sky, and not welcome to anyone who had already made his plans for the day. We had our plans. We had run the Talver Valley 4 times that season and come home 4 times with our count intact, and a team that has done a hard thing 4 times begins to believe the 5th is owed to it. We did not think we needed insurance. That was the word one of the younger men used for her, and it stuck, and I let it stick, and that is the part I would take back if a man were allowed to take back anything. The valley sat in the northeast, where the mountains stop pretending to be hills and become the thing that has killed more soldiers than any enemy, steep, indifferent, folded rock with a cold river at the bottom of it. The Talver River ran the length of the gorge we called the Cut, a shale and pine slot maybe 800 meters across at the wide places, and a stone's throw at the narrow ones, walls going up so sharp on either side that the light came late in the morning and left early in the afternoon. At the mouth of it sat Combat Outpost Larkin, a low huddle of Hesco and plywood, and antennas that the weather was slowly taking back. We staged out of Larkin. We were a SEAL element, 12 of us on the ground for the piece of the operation that mattered, folded into a larger task force that ran the valley on paper and left the walking to us. I was the chief. Sawyer Boone, senior, enlisted on the element, the man the young ones came to when the lieutenant said something they didn't understand, and the man the lieutenant came to when he didn't want to say a thing out loud. 15 years by then. I had a way of looking at a new face and sorting it into one of 2 piles, the ones who would carry their weight and the ones I would end up carrying. It is not a kind habit. It had kept men alive. I told myself that was the same thing. She flew in on the resupply bird with the mail and the water and a case I took at first for a broken-down mortar tube. It was that long and that carefully padded. She got off the ramp and did not do any of the things a new arrival does, did not scan for the important man, did not put on the face that asks to be liked, did not hurry. She stood in the rotor wash with her hood down and her eyes moving over the ridgelines the way you'd read a page, top to bottom, left to right, and when she was done reading them she picked up her case and walked toward the operations shack like she already knew where it was. I watched her go, and I made my 2 piles and I put her in the wrong one. "That's the overwatch they're sending," Kessler said next to me. Kessler was one of the young ones, quick and good and sure the way you are sure at 26, before the mountains have taken anything off you. "She's going to hold a shelf by herself while we're down in the cut. I feel safer already." "She's got a spotter?" Mercer asked. "No spotter," I said, because I had already read the tasking. "Single asset, attached. We didn't request her." That last part was the part that mattered to me at the time. We had not requested her. The valley had gotten louder over the season, more traffic on the ridges, more chatter. A firefight 2 valleys over that had gone worse than it should have. And somebody at a level well above Larkin had decided that our next walk through the cut would have a dedicated eye on the high ground, an overwatch element separate from the team, positioned to see the whole gorge at once. It was, on the map, a reasonable idea. On the ground it felt like a leash. We had run the cut 4 times without a stranger on the ridge deciding what we could and couldn't do, and we were the kind of men who mistake being trusted with being competent, and mistake being watched for being doubted. So when she was still 40 meters away, before she had said a word to any of us, we had already decided what she was. Insurance. The thing you're made to buy and never expect to use. A slot on the tasking order that some staff officer had filled so that if the cut went bad, the paperwork would show that overwatch had been provided. Kessler said it and I heard 11 men laugh, and I did the thing a leader does that is worse than laughing. I said nothing, which is the same as saying yes. She reached the shack, stopped, and looked at the cluster of us standing under the eave out of the rain. She had a plain, weathered face, mid-30s maybe, the kind of face that has been outdoors for a living. Her gear was worn to her, every strap set and taped, nothing loose, nothing new. She had that stillness that I have only ever seen in two kinds of people, the ones who have given up and the ones who have nothing left to prove and know it. I read her as the first kind. I would spend the rest of that night learning she was the second. "Which of you is running the ground element?" she asked. Even voice, no push in it. Kessler jerked a thumb toward the shack. "LT's inside, you the eye in the sky." "I'm your overwatch," she said. "Sable right," Mercer said, reading it off the manifest he was holding. "That your call sign, Sable." She looked at him for a second, and something moved behind her eyes that I did not have the wit to notice then. "That's what they've got written down," she said, which is not the same as yes, and she picked up her case and went inside past all of us, and the door shut, and Kessler grinned at me and said, "Insurance," and I let him say it. I want to be honest about that, because the whole worth of what I'm telling you depends on the honesty of it. I was not cruel to her. I did not shove her against a wall or curse at her, or do any of the loud things that make a man obviously the villain of his own story. What I did was quieter and, I think now, worse. I decided she did not count before she had done a single thing, and I let my men decide it too, and I built a small, comfortable wall between us and her out of the word insurance, and the fact that we had not asked for her. A man can do a great deal of harm without ever raising his voice. I know that now. I am telling you so you know it sooner than I did. That was the last dry hour of that day. By the time the lieutenant came out of the shack with the walk order in his hand, the rain had thickened into the kind that does not stop, and somewhere above us in the gray, on a shelf of rock we would spend the night learning the exact shape of. The overwatch we did not want was already reading the ground we were about to bleed on. The lieutenant's name was Farr. He was young for the bar he wore, sharp in the way that reads as competence in a briefing room, and has to be tested in the field before you know if it's the real thing, and he had come up in the same habit I had: sort the new face, keep the wall, run your team the way your team has always run. He came out with the map board and the enthusiasm of a man who has just been told the plan hasn't changed, and he found her standing off to the side, out of the team's little circle, already dressed to move. "You're the attachment," he said, "not a question." "I'm your overwatch," she said again. She said it the way you'd correct a fact, not the way you'd defend a title. "Here's how this works." Farr set the board on a crate and the team folded in around it, and she stepped up to look, and I watched Farr's shoulder turn a few degrees so that his back was between her and the board without his ever deciding to do it. "We insert before last light, move up the east side of the cut, hit the objective at the second bend, and we're back inside the wire by 03. Overwatch." He did not use her call sign. "Holds the shelf on the west wall here and reports movement." That's it. You see something, you say something. You do not shoot unless we are decisively engaged and I call for it. This is our valley. We've run it 4 times, clear. "The shelf on the west wall doesn't see the second bend," she said. It went quiet under the eave. Farr looked at her the way you look at a piece of equipment that has spoken. "The west shelf gives you the mouth and the first bend," she said, unhurried, her finger not on his board but tracing the shape of the gorge in the air between them, as if she were seeing the whole thing at once from above. "The wall folds at the first bend. Past that, the east side throws a shadow across the floor, and the west shelf is looking at rock. If your objective's at the second bend and it turns into a fight there. Your overwatch is blind for the part where you'll need her. You'd want me across on the east spur above the fold. It's a worse climb and it's a lonelier hole, but it sees the whole floor to the second bend and past it." I remember thinking she talked too much. I remember thinking, there it is, the insurance salesman explaining why we need the expensive policy. What I did not do, what none of us did, was hear that she had just, in 20 seconds and without ever seeing the ground except on a map, described the exact geometry that would try to kill us. She had read the fold in the wall. She had read the shadow on the floor. She had put her finger on the one place from which a single person could see everything, and she had asked to be sent to the hardest, most isolated position on the objective, because it was the only one that would let her do her job. Farr heard a subordinate correcting his plan in front of his men. That is all he heard. "You'll hold the west shelf," he said. "Report movement, don't shoot unless I call." He picked up the board. "We step off in 40. She did not argue. That is the thing I keep coming back to. She did not argue, did not sulk, did not do the wounded thing that a person does when they have been dismissed and want you to know they've been dismissed. She just nodded once, the way you nod at whether you can't change and when to check her case. And I, because I was the chief, and because some part of me wanted to put the wall up one more brick, I followed her over and I said the thing I would give a year of my life to unsay. "Hey," I said, "Overwatch, just so we're square. When we push past the first bend, you're going to lose line of sight on us and you're going to want to move to keep eyes on. Don't. Stay on the west shelf where the LT put you. Stay with the trucks and the plan. We've walked this ground 4 times and we've never needed you to do anything but sit there and watch. You're the insurance we'll never file. Just hold your hole and let us work." I said it kindly. That is the worst of it. I said it in the reasonable, almost gentle voice a senior man uses to put a junior one in their place while pretending to do them a favor, and I think I even believed I was being decent, telling her the truth, keeping her out of trouble, saving her the embarrassment of climbing to a hole nobody would ever ask her to fire from. Stay with the trucks. The insurance will never file. She looked up at me from the case. She had it open now, and I saw the rifle in it for the first time, not a broken mortar tube, a long precision rifle laid in cut foam, the metal of it worn silver at the edges where 10,000 hours of hands had touched it, a thing that had clearly been somewhere and done something, cared for the way a man cares for the one tool he trusts more than his own hands. She closed the lid on it slow, and she looked at me with those still eyes, and she did not get angry, and she did not explain herself, and she said only one thing. "Chief," she said, "I hope you're right about the 4 times. Then she shouldered the case and walked out into the rain toward the west wall, alone, and I watched her go and I felt, for just a second, something cold moved through me that I did not have a name for and would not have a name for until the round started coming down the gorge, and the only friend we had in the world was a woman on a rock we'd sent to the wrong place, who had climbed, in the dark and the rain and against her orders, to the right one. We stepped off at last light, 12 of us, single file, down off the shoulder of the outpost and into the throat of the cut, and the rain came with us the whole way. I want you to understand the country, because the country is the second thing I was wrong about that night, and getting it wrong is what let the first wrong thing nearly bury us all. The Talver Cut is not a valley you walk through. It is a valley you are permitted through, for as long as nothing on the walls has decided otherwise. The floor is loose river stone and stunted alder, the river cold and quick on your left, the walls going up on either hand into pine and shale and the low ceiling of the clouds. In daylight, with the sun straight down at noon, it is merely grim. In the last hour of light, in the rain, it becomes a corridor with 1,000 windows, and behind any of them a man can stand with a rifle and a length of patience and wait for you to walk into the one spot from which he cannot miss. We knew this. We had known it 4 times, and 4 times nothing behind the windows had decided otherwise, and so we had let ourselves believe the windows were empty. We moved well, I'll give us that. 15 years of muscle memory does not leave a team just because the team is wrong about something. It moves smooth, spread, low, weapons up, each man covering his sector, the point man reading the ground and the rear man reading our backtrail and me in the middle where the chief belongs, feeling the whole element through my boots the way you feel a boat through the deck. Farr walked near the front. Kessler had the point. Mercer and a young man named Ochoa carried the heavy gun between them, and Ochoa was talking soft the way he did when he was nervous, and I told him to save his breath for the climb, and he grinned back at me in the gray, and I have thought about that grin a great many times since. Up on the west wall, somewhere behind and above, The overwatch was supposed to be settling into the shelf we'd assigned her. I did not look for her. I had put her out of my mind the way you put out a light in a room you're leaving. Once early, my radio crackled and her even voice came across the net, and I remember exactly what she said because it was the first of the things she said that night that I did not understand until it was almost too late. Ground element overwatch. I'm not on the west shelf. I've moved to the east spur above the fold. I have the whole floor to the second bend. Advise you slow your push at the first bend and let me get eyes on the far wall before you commit past it. There's water pooling in the scree on the north face that shouldn't pool if nobody's cut the runoff channels up there. Somebody's been on that wall recently. Recommend caution. Far keyed his radio before I could key mine. Overwatch, you were told to hold the west shelf, he said, and I heard the anger under the flat of his voice, the anger of a young officer whose subordinate has now disobeyed him twice in one evening, once with her mouth and once with her feet. Get back to your assigned position and report movement. Do not tell this element how to move. Out. There was a pause on the net, not a sulk, a pause like a person deciding not to spend words that won't be received. Copy, she said. Holding the east spur, I've got you, overwatch out. Holding the east spur, not returning to the west shelf. She had told him plainly that she was disobeying his order and staying in the position from which she could actually see us, and she had done it in the calm voice of a person who had already weighed the cost of being wrong about the wall against the cost of being right about it, and had decided which mistake she could live with. Far heard insubordination. I heard insubordination. Neither of us heard the other thing in it, which was that a stranger we'd insulted and benched and left behind was, at that moment, the only person in the entire gorge doing her job, reading the water in the scree, reading the cut runoff channels, reading the signs that the windows above us were not, this fifth time, empty. We pushed to the first bend. The wall folded exactly the way she'd said it would. The east side threw its shadow across the floor exactly the way she'd said it would, and the west shelf, the hole we'd ordered her to sit in, went blind on us exactly the way she'd said it would, so that if she had obeyed her orders she would at that moment have been staring at a wall of wet rock while we walked into the shadow past the fold. I did not think about that then. I thought about the objective at the second bend, and the warm bunk at 03, and the 4 times we'd done this and come home whole. Ochoa said something to Mercer about the gun getting heavy. Kessler, at the point, raised a fist to slow us at the mouth of the shadow. The rain came down. The river ran cold on our left. And then the whole north wall of the Talvir cut opened up at once, and the 5th time began. Muzzle flashes stitched the dark of the north wall from the floor to 50 feet up it, dozens of them, and the sound arrived a half-beat behind the light the way it does when the range is real, not the flat crack of a man close, but the deeper hammering of many guns firing down from height at men caught in the open. The first burst took the shadow past the fold and filled it. I heard the particular sound that rounds make coming into stone around you. And under it, almost at once, the sound they make coming into gear and flesh, and I was down behind a boulder the size of a truck axle before my mind had finished telling my body to move. Contact north, high. That was Kessler at the point, and then Kessler was firing, and all along our line the team was going to ground and finding what cover the loose floor of the cut allowed, which was not much. The river was on our left with nothing behind it but the west wall. The north wall was above us and in front, all those windows lit now, and the floor between was open stone. We had walked into the shadow past the fold, the one stretch of the gorge from which there was no good way out, and the men in the windows had waited for exactly that, and I understood in one cold rush that we had not surprised them once in 4 walks, that they had simply been waiting for a 5th, and choosing the ground, and letting us teach them how we moved. Ochoa's hit, Mercer screaming it, and I could hear the gun not firing, which was the worst sound of all. Ochoa's hit, the gun's down, I need a hand on the gun. I put my head up for half a second to read it and nearly lost the head. Rounds came off my boulder and drove stone chips into my cheek. but half a second was enough to see the shape of the thing, and the shape of it was death. They had us in a bag. The north wall had the volume, and as I watched, fire began to come from the east, from up the gorge, from the direction of the second bend, our objective, where a second element of them had been posted to close the mouth of the bag once we were in it. And a moment later, from behind us, from the way we'd come, a third gun opened up, cutting our back trail. 40 guns, maybe more. I stopped counting flashes because counting them did not help. They were above us on 3 sides, and we were 12, 11 now, with Ochoa down in the open on the floor, and the only side that had no gun on it was the river and the blind west wall beyond it, which offered us nothing but a cold place to die with our backs wet. This is the part that is hard to make a person understand who has not been in it. It was not loud like a movie is loud. It was loud in a way that removes your ability to think in words, so that you stop being a chief with 15 years and a plan, and become an animal doing the 2 or 3 things the animal knows: get low, find cover, put fire back up the wall so the animals up there have to get low too. Farr was shouting into his radio, calling it up to Larkin, calling for the quick reaction force, calling for anything. And I could hear in the pauses that Larkin was answering that the QRF was 30 minutes out at best in this weather and this ground. And 30 minutes was a number that had nothing to do with us, because we did not have 30 minutes. We had, at the rate they were working, about 10. Chief, Kessler, close now, he'd low-crawled back to my boulder dragging his weapon. His face was white and there was blood on it, not his. Chief, they're above us on 3 sides, we can't move. Every time somebody moves they cut him down. Ray's tried to get to Ochoa and they hit Ray's. I know. What do we do? And I did not have an answer. That is the plain truth of it, and I have never dressed it up. I was the senior man on the ground, 15 years, 4 walks through that valley, the man the young ones came to, and I lay behind that boulder with the rain in my collar and Kessler's white face in front of me, and I did not have a single thing to tell him because there was nothing to tell. Every direction was a gun. Every move was a man down. The math of it was finished. We were going to die in the Talvir cut on the 5th walk, in the shadow past the fold, in the one place a woman we'd left behind had told us not to commit to without letting her see the far wall first. And it was in that exact moment, with no answer in my mouth and the bag closing and Ochoa's gun silent and the rain coming down, that the first patient shot came from the high rocks on the east spur, and everything I thought I knew about that night began to come apart. I did not hear it the way you hear the other guns. The north wall was a hammering, a chaos, dozens of weapons firing on full and fast because the men behind them were excited and close to a kill and did not need to be careful. What came off the east spur was one sound. One. A single, deep, deliberate report, spaced off by itself in the noise like a period at the end of a sentence, and up on the north wall one of the muzzle flashes simply stopped. Not suppressed. Stopped. The gun that had been firing from that window went dark and did not light again. Then a second shot, evenly spaced behind the first, not hurried, not a burst, a slow and awful metronome, and a second flash on the north wall went out. Then a third. I have tried many times to describe what it was like to lie in that noise and begin to hear, underneath it, that other thing, that slow, patient, unhurried heartbeat of single shots, each one taking a light off the wall. It was like being in a house full of shouting, and realizing that somewhere in another room someone is speaking very quietly and that everyone is, one by one, going to have to stop shouting and listen. She was not firing fast. She was firing exactly as fast as a person fires who intends to hit with every round and has decided that the way to break 40 men is not to make noise back at them, but to remove them, one at a time from the top down, starting with the ones doing the most damage, so patiently and so certainly that the removing itself became a thing the survivors could feel. That's her, Kessler breathed. He was up on one elbow, looking back and up toward the east spur, toward the position we had ordered her out of and she had refused to leave. Chief, that's the overwatch, that's... The radio in Farr's hand crackled, and her even voice came across the net. no more hurried than it had been when she'd stood under the eave and told him the west shelf couldn't see the second bend. Ground element overwatch. I have the north wall. I count roughly 40 guns on you from 3 sides. North wall's the heavy one. There's a second group up the gorge closing your east and a blocking element on your back trail to the west. You cannot fight your way out of the bag, so we're going to take the bag apart. I'm working the north wall now, top down, taking their gun teams first. When their fire on the floor slacks, and it will slack, I need you to move, not toward the objective, back. To the river's edge, to the base of the west wall, into the dead ground under the fold where the north wall can't depress their guns far enough to reach you. There's a shelf of rock at the waterline, 20 meters behind your rear man. It's covered from above. Get your element there and get me your wounded, and I will walk you out of this gorge one bound at a time. Acknowledge. Farr stared at the radio. I watched a young officer's whole understanding of the evening turn over in his hands like a boat going over in surf. She had disobeyed him twice. She was in the wrong position. She was the insurance we'd never file. And she was, at that moment, the single calmest voice in 100 cubic meters of dying, telling him, telling all of us, precisely where the one piece of safe ground was, ground she could only have known about because she had spent the last hour reading the gorge from the one hole that saw all of it, the hole we'd told her not to climb to. Farr keyed the radio. Whatever was in him that was worth the bar he wore came out then, because he did not argue, and he did not stand on his rank, and he said the only right thing. Overwatch, this is 6, understood. We move to the waterline shelf on your call. Boone's got the left, I've got the right. We're yours, tell us when. Moving now on the north wall, she said. Stand by. When I take the machine gun on the big ledge, you'll know it. It's the loudest gun up there. The whole wall's going to flinch. That's your window. Go on my call. Overwatch out. And up on the east spur, alone in the rain, against 40 guns, on a rock we had sent her away from, she went back to work, and I lay in the noise and listened to a woman I'd called insurance begin, one patient shot at a time, to take a light off the wall. She took the big gun on the ledge 4 shots later. I heard it happen the way she'd said I would. There was a heavy machine gun up on a wide shelf near the top of the north wall, the loudest thing on the enemy's side, a gun that had been raking the floor in long traversing bursts and pinning us more than any other single weapon, and I heard her single report come across the noise, spaced and certain, and the big gun stopped in the middle of a burst. There was a pause. The whole north wall seemed to catch its breath. The way a room does when something has happened that everyone saw, and in that pause, that flinch, that half-second where the men in the windows understood for the first time that there was something up on the east spur that could reach them, and was choosing them one by one, our fire was not the only thing keeping their heads down anymore. Their own dead was doing it. Now, Farr roared. Waterline shelf, go, go, bounding. Boone, take your half. We moved. God help me, we moved, and it worked. In the window her shot had bought us, we came up off the open floor and went for the dead ground at the base of the west wall, bounding, half the element up and running while the other half fired, then flipping, the runners going to ground and firing while the others ran. It is the oldest drill there is, and we could do it in our sleep. But you cannot do it at all when every rifle on 3 walls is free to track you. And now every rifle on 3 walls was not free, because every few seconds one of them went dark, and the men behind the rest had learned to fear the dark and were shooting less and hiding more. I got Ochoa myself, got a hand in his drag strap and hauled him with me, and he was alive, breathing wet and fast but alive, and Mercer got the gun. And Reyes was hit in the leg but moving, and man by man we peeled off the killing floor, and into the pocket of dead ground she had found for us at the waterline, the shelf of rock under the fold where the north wall's guns could not bend down far enough to reach. And the whole time over us that slow metronome, take a light off the wall, let the wall flinch, buy us a bound, take another. She was not covering us with volume the way we'd have covered a movement, a wall of fire to make the enemy duck. She had no volume. She was one rifle. She was covering us with certainty. With the accumulating, dawning terror she was putting into 40 men as they understood that being a muzzle flash on that wall was, tonight, a death sentence delivered on a schedule, by someone they could not find and could not reach and could not make afraid. We got everyone into the dead ground. Everyone. Ochoa and Reyes hit but alive, the other 9 of us whole, 11 men and 1 gun in a pocket of rock at the river's edge, and for the first time since the north wall opened up, no one was being hit. I lay there with Ochoa's head against my thigh, my hand pressed to the wet mess high on his shoulder, and I looked up through the rain toward the east spur, toward the hole we told her not to climb to, and I could not see her. Of course I could not see her. That was the whole point of where she was. She could see everything and no one could see her, and she had known that from a map under an eave an hour before any of the rest of us knew we were going to need saving. "Chief," Kessler beside me, pressing a dressing onto Reyes's leg, his hands shaking now that we were still enough for the shaking to catch up. "Chief," I said insurance. I stood there and I said insurance. And he couldn't finish it. "I know," I said worse, "hold that dressing." The radio crackled. "Ground element, everyone in the dead ground. Give me a count." Farr keyed it, his voice was not steady. "Overwatch 6, 11 and the gun in the pocket, 2 wounded, both stable. You've got them all." "Good," she said, just that. Not proud, not winded even, which I could not understand. She had been firing a heavy precision rifle uphill in the rain for what felt like an hour and was probably 4 minutes, and her voice was as level as a lake. "Now we get you out. The blocking element on your back trail to the west is the way home. The QRF's coming down that way and the ground opens up behind them. I'm going to work that western group next and thin it out, and then you're going to move down the water line in the dead ground the whole way, and I'm going to walk over you the entire time. You will not be uncovered for 1 step. When you reach the mouth of the cut, you'll link with the QRF. Any man who tells me he can't make it, you tell him Overwatch says he can. Acknowledge." "Acknowledged," Farr said. And then after a second, in a different voice, a young man's voice, stripped of the bar and the anger and the wall, he keyed the radio again and said, "Overwatch, thank you. We were finished. You know that. We were finished and you." "Save it," she said, not unkindly. "We're not out yet. Move your men. Overwatch out." And then, alone on her spur, she turned that slow, terrible metronome onto the western wall, onto the group that stood between us and home, and one by one, on her schedule, she began to take the lights off of that wall too. We came down the water line in the dead ground, in the dark and the rain, and she walked over us the whole way, exactly as she'd said she would. I have been covered by good men in my life. I have been covered by fire so heavy it seemed the air itself was on our side. I had never before that night been covered by one person, and I will tell you it is a different thing entirely, and the difference is in the quality of the quiet. When a squad covers you, you move inside a roar. When she covered us, we moved inside a silence that she was making, because every time a gun on the walls tried to find us, she found it first, and it went dark. And the other guns learned again and again that lighting up was dying, until the walls that had held 40 guns were mostly holding 40 frightened men lying flat behind rock, not daring to lift a head. While 11 of us and a heavy gun and 2 wounded slid down the length of the Talvir, cut through a corridor of stillness, she was building 1 shot at a time. I carried Ochoa. Mercer and Kessler traded the gun. We kept to the base of the wall in the fold's shadow, and we moved when she told us to move and held when she told us to hold. And twice her even voice came across the net to tell us to stop, just stop. Hold where you are, and each time, a few seconds later, a shot, and a gun we would have walked straight under went dark, and then move, and we moved. She was reading the whole gorge and us inside it, seeing threats before they became threats, spending her rounds not on the enemy who was shooting but on the enemy who was about to. It is the hardest kind of shooting there is. It is not marksmanship. It is prophecy with a rifle, and she did it in the rain, uphill, alone, for the better part of a mile, and she did not miss, and she did not hurry, and she did not once come apart. Near the mouth of the cut, the western group tried to rally. I heard their fire pick up, heard men shouting to each other up on the wall, the sound of an enemy trying to gather himself for one more push before we slipped the bag entirely, and I heard her voice on the net, for the only time that night, go hard. Ground element, hold in the dead ground, all of you. Do not move for the next 30 seconds no matter what you hear. A pause. They're massing on the west shoulder to rush the mouth before you clear it. I see them. Hold. And then she did the thing that I did not know a single rifle could do. She fired faster, still spaced, still certain, but faster, that metronome speeding to something urgent and merciless. And I lay in the rock with Ochoa breathing against me, and I counted the shots, and I counted the guns going dark on the west shoulder. And it was not one, and it was not three. It was more than I will say here because the number does not matter and the men do. But she took the whole rally apart in the time she'd said, 30 seconds, one rifle against a massing element. And when it was done, the west shoulder was silent and the shouting had stopped, and the men who were left on it had learned the last lesson she had to teach, which was that there was no gathering yourself against her, no rush that outran her, no safety anywhere on those walls while she was on the spur and breathing. Move, she said, level again. You're clear to the mouth. QRF's 200 meters out on the far side, and I've told them you're coming. Go home. We went home. We came out of the mouth of the Talver, cut into the arms of the quick reaction force, 20 men pushing up the gorge with a corpsman and litters, and I handed Ochoa to hands that could do more for him than mine, and I stood in the rain at the mouth of that valley, and I shook, finally, the way Kessler had shaken, the shaking of a man whose body has finally been told it is allowed. 11 of us, 2 wounded, both of whom would live, not one killed. In a bag with 40 guns on 3 walls, in the shadow past the fold, on the 5th walk, not one of us killed. And every man there knew, without a word being said, that the reason we were standing in the rain instead of lying in the cut was a woman on a rock we had told to stay behind. She came down off the east spur a long time later, after the QRF had pushed up and cleared what was left of the walls, after the birds had finally been able to come in and take Ochoa and raise out through a break in the weather. She came down the hard way, the way she'd gone up, alone, with her case slung and her rifle in her hands, and she walked into the light of the vehicles at the mouth of the cut, soaked through, and moving stiff the way you move after hours in a firing position in the cold, and she stopped at the edge of where we were all gathered, and she looked at us. And nobody said insurance. I want to tell you about the quiet, because the quiet is the whole thing. There were 23 of us there by then, hard men, SEALs and the QRF both, men who do not go silent easily and do not hand out respect for free. And when she walked into the light, every one of them stopped talking, not because anyone called them to attention, not because of her rank. Most of us still did not know her rank, or her name, or anything about her except what she had just spent 2 hours proving on that wall. They went quiet the way men go quiet when something has walked among them that is larger than they had understood the world to contain, and they had all, every one of us, been on the receiving end of the proof. Kessler was the first to move. Young Kessler, who had said the word under the eave, who had felt safer already. He stepped out of the group and he stood in front of her, and I saw him try to find something to say and fail. And then he did the only thing there was to do, which was that he came to attention and he saluted her, in the field, at night, in the rain, against every convention that says you do not salute in a combat zone, and he held it. And she looked at him for a moment, this young man who had mocked her and whom she had just carried out of a grave, and there was nothing in her face of triumph, no gloating, no I told you so, nothing but a bone-deep tiredness and something that might have been kindness, and she returned it. And then Mercer stepped out and did the same. And then the QRF men who had not even been in the cut, who knew only what they'd heard on the net and seen in the count of living men, they came to attention too. Farr went to her last. The lieutenant who had turned his shoulder to keep her from the map board, who had ordered her twice to the wrong hole, who had told her not to tell his element how to move. He walked up to her and he could not at first meet her eyes. He looked at the ground, at the rifle in her hands, at anything but her face, the way a man does when the size of what he was wrong about is more than he can lift all at once. And then he made himself look up and he said quietly, so that only those of us closest heard it, "I ordered you to the west shelf. Twice. If you'd obeyed me, we'd all be dead in that gorge right now. Every one of us. You disobeyed me, and it's the only reason any of us are alive." He stopped. His jaw worked. "I don't have the words. I'm sorry isn't the word. But I saw what you did up there, and I'll be telling it as long as I live, and I'll be telling the part where I sent you to the wrong hole and you went to the right one anyway. On the record, all of it." She looked at him for a long moment, and then she said the only thing I ever heard her say about the whole night that came close to being about herself, and even then it wasn't, really. "The plan wasn't wrong because you're a bad officer," she said. "It was wrong because you'd never been beaten in that valley, and a man who's never been beaten reads the ground he won on instead of the ground he's standing on. That's not a flaw. That's just a thing that hasn't been corrected yet. It's corrected now." She shifted the case on her shoulder. "You put your men into a bag tonight. You also, when it counted, listened to the voice that could see the way out, and you moved them when I called, and you didn't waste a second arguing about who was right. That's the part that saved them at the end. Not me. You listening. Do that next time and you won't need me." It was the most generous thing I have ever heard one soldier say to another, and she said it flat like a fact. And Farr took it the way you take a thing you have not earned and know it, with his eyes wet and his spine straight, and he saluted her, and she returned it, and it was done. And then it was my turn, and I have been most of my life getting ready to tell you about my turn, so I will tell it plainly. I walked up to her. 15 years, senior man on the element, the one who had followed her to her case under the eave and said the thing about the trucks and the insurance we'd never file, said it kindly, which was the worst of it. She watched me come. She knew who I was. Of everything I'd said, mine had been the one aimed most directly at making her small, and she had heard it. And then she had climbed a mountain in the dark against her orders and spent 2 hours in the freezing rain making certain that the man who'd said it would see his family again. I did not have Farr's speech. I am not a man of speeches. I stood in front of her and I found that my throat did not work the first time I tried it, and I had to try it twice, and what came out was not eloquent. It was just true. "I called you insurance," I said. "I told you to stay with the trucks. I told you we'd never need you." My voice went and I let it go in front of all of them because there are things a man should not be too proud to let go of. "You carried 11 of us out of that valley. You carried me out. And you did it after I stood there and told you to your face that you didn't matter. I don't." I stopped, started again. "I have sorted men into 2 piles my whole career. The ones who carry their weight and the ones I'll end up carrying. I put you in the wrong pile the second you got off that bird, and you're the best soldier I have ever stood next to, and I'll know that for the rest of my life, and so will everyone standing here." She was quiet for a moment. The rain came down, and then she put out her hand not to be saluted. She'd had enough of that, but the plain hand of one soldier to another, and I took it, and her grip was hard and cold and certain, the grip of the hands that had worn that rifle silver at the edges, and she said, "You came down the waterline when I called it, Chief, and you carried the boy with the shoulder wound the whole way and never dropped him. I watched you do it through the glass. I don't sort men into piles, but if I did, I saw which one you're in tonight, and it isn't the one you think." She let go of my hand. "Go see about your wounded, and the next stranger they send you that you didn't ask for, take them up on the ridge yourself and show them the ground. You'll all live longer." We found out her name later from the task force, and her call sign that the manifest had shortened to Sable was longer than that and older than that, and attached to a reputation that, once we heard it, made the memory of Kessler saying insurance under the eave into a thing none of us could think about without flinching. She had held ground alone before. It was, we learned, the thing she was known for, not one famous shot, not a number on a range card, but a way of being the last steady point on a field coming apart, the rock in the river, the voice on the net that did not rise. They had sent her to us because the valley had gotten dangerous and somebody above Larkin had understood, better than we had, exactly how dangerous, and had reached for the one asset who could hold a whole gorge alone. And we had met her under an eave in the rain and called her insurance. She flew out 2 days later on the same kind of bird she'd flown in on, with the mail and the empty water cans. The whole element came out to the pad this time, all of us, and Ochoa, who was stable enough to travel and going out on the same bird to a real hospital, made them stop the litter so he could shake her hand before they loaded him, and she bent down and said something to him none of us heard, and he nodded, and he was smiling when they slid him aboard. She got on last. She stood on the ramp the way she had the first day, hood down, eyes moving over the ridgelands top to bottom, reading the ground one more time, and then she looked back at the 11 of us standing on the pad in the rotor wash, and she did not wave, and she did not smile, and she did not need to. She just looked at us for a moment, the men she'd carried home, and then the ramp came up and the bird lifted and banked out over the Talver cut and was gone into the gray. Kessler stood next to me watching it go. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, "Chief, I'm going to be telling that story when I'm an old man." "So am I said. "Nobody's going to believe it. 1 rifle, 40 guns. "No," I said, "they won't. But that is not why I have told it to you, and it is not the part that matters. And I want to end on the part that matters, because I did not understand it that night, and it took me years to understand it, and I do not want it to take you that long. The part that matters is not that one soldier held a gorge alone against 40 guns, though she did. The part that matters is that she did it for men who had told her, kindly and to her face, that she did not count. She did not save the 11 of us because we had earned it. We had not earned it. We had earned the opposite. She saved us because we were hers to save, because she had been given us to keep, and she kept us, and whether we had been decent to her under the eave did not enter into it at all. That is a kind of largeness I did not know a person could carry, and I have spent the rest of my life trying to carry a little of it myself, and failing and trying again. I called her insurance. I told her to stay with the trucks. I told her we'd never file. She brought 11 men home through a wall of guns in the rain, and she never once let me see that she remembered what I'd said. And I will remember what I said, and what she did, every day I have left, and I will tell it, all of it. The wrong pile and the eave and the trucks and the water line and the salute in the rain, on the record, as long as I live. That is the weight I carried out of the Talver cut. It is the heaviest thing I own. I would not set it down for anything in this world.